1958. Syria, a nation swept up by Nasser's Arab nationalist wave and merged with Egypt to form the Arab Union, a glorious state to last forever. In reality, 1958 was nothing but the start of a tumultuous decade full of coups, counter-coups, insurgencies, and war.
Half the population of Damascus milled round the important visitor from Egypt. President Nasser could just be seen as he was escorted towards the town hall. Any formality planned for this state visit was pushed aside by the people's enthusiasm. Egypt and Syria constitute the United Arab Republic. No Israeli ships through the Suez Canal. That's Nasser's policy, always good for a cheer from an Arab crowd.
Nasser entered Damascus in triumph to cheering crowds. In Syria, everyone had their own opinion of how to proceed. Chief among this was the status of Syria inside the Union. Some, like Colonel Afif al-Bizri, wanted to fuse Marxist policies to bring about a Nasserist revolution inside Syria, while others, like the ex-president of Syria Shukri al-Quwatli, wanted the nation to remain semi-sovereign and to keep the status quo economic policies. Nasser himself had other ideas. He had no intention of letting the Syrians be equal for fear of the union breaking apart. So, he sidelined both al-Quwatli and al-Bizri and instead appointed a viceroy to govern Syria. In regards to the economic situation, he went all in.
الفقراء ليهم الجنة. طيب الفقراء ليهم الجنة والفقراء دول ما لهمش نصيب في الدنيا، نصيبهم بس في الآخرة. هم عايزين أيضا نصيب صغير في الدنيا ويديكوا قصاده نصيب في الجنة.
Policies that had worked in his favor in Egypt were passed. Unfortunately for him, these policies did not work out in Syria, and instead it turned the wealthy and middle classes against him, as they feared that these policies would ruin their life's work. Then, Nasser also turned the communists and Baathists against him by purging or chasing them away. By then, only the Syrian Nasserists themselves remained to support him. But he turned them off too, by taking away power from Syrians and sending his vice president Abdul Hakim Amir to rule Syria as his viceroy. Although Amir was officially only the inspector general, it was clear that he was ruling Syria in Nasser's name as a province of Egypt. The union was eventually dissolved on 20th September 1961 when a clique of Syrian army officers led by Lieutenant Colonel Abdel Karim al-Nahlawi led a coup d'etat with help from Baathists and Democrats to remove the Egyptians and proclaim Syria as a republic. While the army had all the power, it chose not to rule directly and instead entrusted politicians from the traditional political parties of the earliest Syrian republic to form the secessionist government. The restored country was a continuation of the Syrian republic, but due to the influence of Nasserists and Arab nationalists, it adopted a new name and became the Syrian Arab Republic. The restored regime was fragile and chaotic as internal army struggles influenced government policies. Furthermore, the new government abruptly reversed Nasser's socialist policies, which led to mass resentment among the rural and working classes. In March 1962, al-Nahlawi, now disgruntled with the government, attempted to seize power for himself again. But his coup failed. At this time, another storm was about to hit Syrian politics. The Baath. Founded in the late 40s by Mikhail Aflaq and Salah ad-Din Bittar, the Baath was a radical Arab nationalist organization. Unlike Nasserism, it was not centered on a single persona, but aimed to establish a wider front all across the Arab world. And while Nasser espoused some socialist reforms, The Baath was more ideologically fanatic and wanted to focus on both rural and urban revolutionary socialism. Aflaq himself was its head, but he was not material for national leadership. For that, he needed a strongman from the military. He found the perfect candidate for this in General Amin al-Hafez. On 27 July 1963, al-Hafez, his head of security Ahmed Suidani, and their men stormed the Syrian military and government offices and took control. Next, they forced Syria's president al-Qudsi to sign a letter of resignation at gunpoint. Finally, they entered the Radio Damascus building and announced to the world about a peaceful transition to power. The whole operation had taken a mere few hours, but it had cost the lives of more than 800 men. The next morning, huge crowds gathered in Damascus Square to celebrate the beginning of a new Syria, free of bourgeoisie democracy and Nasserist oppression. The workers of the city cheered on the Baath and their liberation. Al-Hafez was proclaimed the president. He instituted socialist reforms and reoriented his country towards the Eastern Bloc. The celebrations, however, would be short-lived. Merely 31 months later, al-Hafez himself was removed from office. Historians attribute this to the increasing paranoia of the regime, as Hafez and Ahmed Suidani led multiple purges and constantly changed ministerial positions out of fear of espionage or coup, one of them being the famous Israeli spy Eli Cohen. On 23 February 1966, al-Hafez was violently removed from office by his chief of staff Salah Jadid after a 3-hour shootout. The coup sprung out of factional rivalry between Jadid's regionalist Qutri camp of the Baath party, which promoted ambitions for a greater Syria, and the more traditionally pan-Arab al-Hafez faction called the nationalist or Qawmi faction. Jadid's supporters were also seen as more radically left-wing. The coup was supported and led by officers from Syria's religious minorities, especially the Alawites and the Druze, whereas al-Hafez belonged to the majority Sunni population. One of those supporters was none other than Ahmed Suidani, who received a promotion for his aid, while the other was a young officer named Hafez al-Assad. Shortly after taking power, Jadid started a brutal process of enforcing hard-line socialist policies. He mistrusted everyone and also did not let many aspiring men join the Baath party because he felt that a majority of who joined were mere opportunists. Jadid also broke diplomatic relations with all countries he deemed to be reactionary, such as Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and even Egypt. This, in effect, isolated Syria and made party members uneasy. Furthermore, Syria was humiliated and lost territory in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, which caused a catastrophic damage to the cause of Arab nationalism. In 1970, when conflict erupted again on Jordan between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Jordanian army, Jadid sent Syrian-controlled Palestinian troops to aid them. This move was not appreciated by Hafez al-Assad and his right-wing faction. Then in November that year, Jadid further attempted to cement his rule by firing al-Assad. The move backfired as the Baath party and the Syrian army, tired of Jadid's radicalization and purges, supported al-Assad, who imprisoned Jadid and launched a corrective revolution to purge those disloyal to him. At that time, al-Assad was just one in a series of many warlords. But as it turned out, Hafez al-Assad was here to stay. He would go on to rule Syria for the next 3 decades, and then his son after him. In the words of Robert de Kaplan, the Alawite Assad's coming to power is like an untouchable becoming Maharaja in India, or a Jew becoming the Tsar in Russia. an unprecedented development shocking to the Sunni majority world, which had monopolized power for so many centuries.